Turning to building safety remediation and the leaseholder protections in the Building Safety Act, we wish to ensure that those protections work as originally intended. We've therefore brought forward an amendment which fixes a particular gap in the Building Safety Act to ensure that qualifying leases retain their protection if the lease is extended, varied or replaced by an entirely new lease. We do not, however, agree that the amendment which seeks to secure parity between non-qualifying and qualifying leaseholders and to exclude shares of a property of 50% or less from being counted as owned for the purposes of calculating whether a lease qualifies for the protections or not should be accepted. There are a number of defects with this amendment. In particular, it would remove the protections once remediation work is complete, which a number of stakeholders have described to us as a potentially worrying change. The Government laid amendments to this bill, now clauses 239 and 240, which will allow us to transfer the Building Safety Regulator out of the Health and Safety Executive in the future. This will make sure that we are ready and have the flexibility in place to respond to the Grenfell Tower inquiry report when it's published. When the Building Safety Regulator is moved, the essential committees established under sections 9 to 11 of the Act will need to be transferred. We're therefore unable to accept an amendment that prevents us removing the references to the Health and Safety at Work Act in relation to these committees. But let me take this opportunity to make clear that the Government have no intention to amend the make-up or role of these committees.
Turning to Lord's Amendment 242. This seeks to remedy a glaring defect within the Building Safety Act 2022, namely that qualifying leaseholders who have been required to extend or vary their lease subsequent to the Act coming into force in June last year have found themselves ineligible for the leaseholder protections it provides because a lease extension is technically a new lease, not an extension of the same lease. The very fact that this defect was allowed to arise is a source of serious concern, particularly given that the Leasehold Reform Ground Rent Act 2022, passed only a few months before the Building Safety Act, included provisions designed to ensure the same problem could not arise under it. It is a salutary warning of the problems that arise when a government chooses to legislate in haste on an issue and does not provide the House with adequate time to scrutinise a bill. However, the government, to their credit, have accepted that this problem needs to be remedied, and the amendment in lieu they've tabled to Amendment 242 achieves that end and does so with retrospective effect. While there are many more issues relating to the building safety crisis that require the government to think again, not least the plight of non-qualifying leaseholders the government choose to exclude from protections under the Building Safety Act, we welcome the concession made, albeit with one proviso, and that is that ministers must take steps to ensure that leaseholders who paid service charges over the past 15 months in the belief that they were not eligible for the leaseholder protections under the Act because of the government's mistake are reimbursed. Those individuals should not suffer financially as a result of a drafting error that should not have been allowed to occur in the first place. If the Minister, who I hope is listening to this point, can provide us with some reassurance on that point, we will happily accept the Government's amendment in lieu.
My main point is Amendments 242 and 243, where Lord Young of Cookham has helped leaseholders. It's the qualifying and non-qualifying leaseholders, residential leaseholders. The government's proposals are limited to residential leaseholders, not to commercial leaseholders. I accept that. What I don't think the House should accept, and the government should think again, is first of all why you have to have the distinction between a qualifying and a non-qualifying leaseholder. There are many non-qualifying leaseholders who have homes that can't get a mortgage on, homes they can't sell, and homes where they can't avoid paying very high annual costs as well as remediation costs. I repeat the question put by the honourable member for the Labour Party about what happens to people who now will qualify, who have paid, and I'd be grateful if the Minister in winding up give clear advice or to make a statement later on what happens to leaseholders facing claims for payment which they think they shouldn't have to pay. Can people get out of this dilemma, which is caused, frankly, by too many people in government not understanding the legal status of residential leaseholders? I don't believe that Judith Hackett understood it when she put forward her fire safety proposals. I don't think government in the early days understood. Now that they do understand, please remove the distinction. The idea that if you're below 11 metres you aren't facing unmortgageable, unsellable homes is wrong. There are many people who do have leasehold homes under that level who are frankly in a dilemma that government ought to be able to resolve. There are many elements which I support that the government can take for granted. But on the things where they're allowing injustice to continue or ineffective approaches to continue, let's change that. Let's be on the side of those of the 5 to 6 million residential leaseholders who for too long we've ignored, whose situation has been understood poorly. Now it's understood better, we ought to allow them to have better lives, healthier lives, happier lives and more financially secure lives.